My next guest is a husband, a father, and someone navigating life with Lyme disease in real time. My next guest is Grant Hageman. Dude, thank you so much, Grant, for coming on here, man. I know it's definitely can be hard to kind of share your story, and so I really appreciate it. And yeah, man, thank you for being with me today, man.
Absolutely excited about it.
How have you been feeling? I know we talked a couple days ago. You were talking about kind of things, with the health stuff. So, how you been feeling lately?
Yeah. Um, it's been weird, a lot of ups and downs. I'm going through new treatment right now, so feels a little different than just my normal baseline. Sometimes I feel like I'm below it, and sometimes I'm really good. So it's just part of the challenge is trying to sort out what's working and what's not.
Before we get into that, I know you mentioned that you were in. You realized I was a musician, and you're also a musician as well.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that, man. What you told me something? I think you said you traveled a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm a piano player. My parents forced me into it when I was younger, and I hated it. And I had to learn how to read sheet music and the full formal way of playing piano. And was finally allowed to quit when I was 13, and I didn't touch the piano for I don't know a few years. Then I started to slowly just plink away at learn songs out of my head, or I would hear a song and try and figure out the melody. Eventually, I just started playing all the time, just by ear. And so got connected with some my church and played a little bit with their worship team, and then got connected with a local ministry that would go out and do conferences. So I joined their worship team and traveled for a year doing that. So always loved playing, but my true passion is actually just solo improv. Playing with the group is fun, but I always go back to just playing for myself. Really, it's like sort of a de-stressor for me if I'm really having a hard day or just need to calm down. Just go and start playing whatever comes to mind.
Where did you? Where are you from exactly?
So Southwest Michigan, Berrien County. It's the farthest south and west you can go in Michigan. So we're right next to the lake, and just north of South Bend, Indiana. So where Notre Dame is located.
Nice. What do you think about the piano behind me?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a Kawai K3. I had looked like
Okay.
when I first bought my house, I didn't have any furniture, and I was like, man, I really want a piano. And I'd grown up with pianos at home, but I never like I don't know, I just never had like a really nice one.
Yeah.
And so before I bought any furniture, I bought this thing, and like you said, honestly, for me, it's kind of been therapeutic for me as well to just sit down and
Mm-hmm.
play, especially through some of the hard days. Like I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell you how many times I've sat down and just started playing, and then it's just I don't know, man, it hits.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Just that being able to express your emotion in a way that it's a unique way to express how you're feeling. Really.
Well, it's like you're able to sing without singing, almost like I
Mm-hmm.
guess you can express emotions through the keys, and you can do that with guitar or any instruments. And I was talking to a lady the other day. She said her 12-year-old has Lyme, and he's been going through a lot, obviously, but he's found a new passion in music, and it's been super therapeutic for him. So that's I don't know, it's pretty cool. It's we talked a little bit on the phone about kind of my journey with music, and then Lyme, and Lyme kind of knocked me away from music, to be honest. And I've kind of just been right now, every now and then, doing something musically, but really just focused on health. So, Michigan, I think I've been there a handful of times, even in my touring, like you. But when you played, you were part of a ministry, right? Not like a band.
Yeah, it's called Life Action Ministries. So they're focused on doing church conferences. They have usually three or four road teams, and just go out, go to different churches. Um, I want to say we went to maybe 15 churches in a year. Um, we would play every night except for like one night out of the week. So, and then we do it twice on Sunday. So I counted up, and in that year, I think I played 180 times to a live. audience, essentially. So you get broken in really quick on how to play, how to adapt, especially like when you're playing in front of people. It's really important to not just be so rigid that you have to hit every note right, but playing and flexing with the rest of the group.
You mentioned, I think it was accounting, right? How did you get into that, or financial advising?
Yeah, financial planning. So I was one of the guys that I just never knew what I wanted to do with my life. I was originally looking into graphic design. Then I didn't like that's a dead end job. Like you kind of do maybe some, freelance work, but it's hard to make a living on it. And so I shifted to psychology because I knew I wanted to work with people in some way. And then I was just kind of found jobs as they came. I was working at a temp agency, not as a temp, but I was like placing people in jobs. And that's when I got married. And first thing I did with my wife is we went to the bank. I got her added to my accounts, met with my financial advisor. I had a really small investment account with them. And we just started talking and we got done with that meeting. And I turned to my wife. I'm like, okay, did that make sense to you? Do you know where we're at? She's like, I don't know anything about this, but you do. She's like, you need to look into doing this as a career because I could tell you're really passionate about it. And I was, and we were making a lot of progress just as young couples. Financial situation of getting started is usually really hard, and that was true for us. And so I got really passionate about making financial progress. And so that was just something that really sent me into that industry.
You mentioned you got married. When did like things start to shift for you, and you kind of felt like something was wrong health wise? Were you already married?
Oh yeah, yeah. We got married in 2015, and just generally healthy person. Would work out um, pretty often, at least twice a week, usually. And we try to be active. We'd go walks, go on walks every evening after work, typically in the summer. Um, and then every once in a while, something weird would happen. Like I started getting migraines out of the blue, but they were like once a year. It wasn't like common. And then I woke up on my 30th birthday with vertigo. I'm like, welcome to 30, and then, and that was the only time I ever really had it at that point. And it only happened one other time since then. And then 2023, fall of 2023, I had just this weird nerve pain in my foot. It ended up being tarsal tunnel, where the tendon is inflamed and bumps into your nerve. You can feel all this nerve sensation in your foot, and that lasted for like 3 months. So it was early 2024 when I started noticing I was waking up and my hand was tingling in the morning, and I kind of felt like I was losing circulation in that hand. And it was usually after a few days after I worked out and did like grip strength training. So I just figured I'm getting older. I think at the time I was 34, and maybe this is part of getting older, is your body just doesn't respond to working out the same way. And that was kind of my explanation, I guess, for what I was going through. Then in April of 2024, I just had the only way I describe it is a heart palpitation attack. It's not like a heart attack, but I just started getting hammered this one evening with heart palpitations. And it was like really hard, like beats to the chest every like 4 or 5 every 5 minutes or so, just like boom, boom, boom in a row. And I just started getting like super nervous. I felt really bad at the same time. I felt like I needed to lay down a lot. And like got to the end of the evening and kind of was able to come home. I was at an event. I was able to come home and lay down, and things kind of calmed down, and I was able to go to sleep and woke up the next day and it was okay. And then it just started happening again. And I went to the doctor. They checked me out, EKG and everything was okay. And the doctor was like, well, you're probably just stressed. So just here's a beta blocker, take this. And before I was able to fill out the prescription, just things started getting better. And by a week, I wasn't having any heart palpitations really at all. And so about a month later, I was better, but I never felt like 100%. I was like 98%. It was just felt a little weird still. I couldn't place it, but I remember working out at the gym and just feeling I couldn't push myself like 100% like I normally could. And then it was about a month after that where I got two migraines basically a week apart, which had never happened before. And I just started getting into the thick of Lyme symptoms. So that's kind of how things progressed into what I would consider like active Lyme.
It's interesting that you mentioned heart palpitations, going to the doctor, them saying pretty much it's stress, and then putting you on a beta blocker.
Yeah.
That's literally my story, man. I
Mm-hmm.
went to a doctor after my first panic attack, and the panic attack was from a heart palpitation that stemmed. It was like in the center of my chest, but it felt like electricity, like somebody had stunned me with a stun gun,
Mm.
and it frightened me. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up to it pretty much. It just boom. It was like a electricity shot through my whole body, and I stood up, called 911. You know, they came in and did a EKG and did a check my blood pressure. My blood pressure was, you know, I don't know, 127 over something or it was really high. I don't remember what it was, but they
Sure.
said, man, you're going to have a stroke. You need to get to the ER. Went to the ER. They checked me out and said, hey man, like you're completely fine, but you probably need to get on some type of beta blocker or some type of blood pressure medicine. Went to my
Right.
PCP. He put me on a beta blocker, told me it was stress, the whole thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I I just thought that's all it was. You know what I mean? I thought it was like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but at that point though, for me, the beta blocker made things way worse, and then I just started declining big time. How did those heart palpitations affect you mentally? Because for me, when I started having the heart palpitations, I went into like health anxiety and panic and
Mm-hmm.
all that.
Yeah, it was at that point. Probably it was like a week long period where I was having them at that level, and I've never actually had them that bad since. So, but when it originally occurred, I was actually at a client event where we were out with our clients, you know, doing some like relationship building with them, and I was eating a meal and like it just started hitting me, and I just felt like I had to either lay down or like pace. So I just started pacing the hallways, and that kind of calmed me down. I felt like my stomach was like really like cramping up on me, like classic signs I'm like really in deep stress. And so I knew something was up and it just didn't feel right. I've had some heart palpitations like that before, but just not that intense. And it got to the point where like I got home and my chest felt like it was sore from these things, you know, a little bit. And so, but it wasn't like it was constant throughout the day. Like the next day, it felt good until like the afternoon, and then they start happening all of a sudden again. And so every day it got better until a week later. And I never actually ended up taking the beta blockers at that time because it got better. And I was thinking, you know, I've heard that maybe an infection can cause heart palpitations. Maybe that's what happened is I was just fighting something because that's what it felt like to me. So I'm not sure. Did that answer your question or did you have a follow up on that?
No, I was just curious how it affected you, you know, mentally, I guess, because, you know,
Yeah.
heart stuff is scary. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
a lot of
I see what you're saying.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people have a lot of the heart related symptoms kind of early on.
Hmm.
You know, for me, it was like brain fog, pots where I would like go pick something up and then I would stand up and I would just be like super like whoa, like kind of out of it. And then
Right.
came the heart palpitations and all the other stuff that came with it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I was just curious if that affected you mentally because a lot of people go into that spiral. And I was talking to another person on one of the Lyme groups, and we were talking about how over medicated we are as a nation, but also how many people are out there that have these types of infections that are being medicated out of their mind because they're told it's stress or anxiety or, you know, something like that, instead of like finding the root of the problem. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
kind of, I mean,
Right.
it's scary because the way I view my journey with Lyme is I'm like, okay, had I started taking the antidepressants and the anti-anxiety medicine and all that kind of stuff and stayed on a beta blocker and all that, how much worse would I be? You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely did affect me mentally. Like I remember just feeling really panicked out when that started happening and just started to feel like, oh man, am I having a heart attack? Type of thing, and just really scared. That may be why kind of I felt like I had a pace just to calm myself down. I don't really know. But yeah, it's definitely a scary thing when stuff like that starts to happen. Just wonder like what is really going on.
Yeah. What was the, how did you go from basically a normal life, started having these symptoms to finding out it was Lyme?
Yeah, I mean that honestly, I'm one of the fortunate few. It's my mind. It's really a God thing. I just started having all of these extra symptoms, very similar to yours, John. I was started having just dizziness throughout the day and just feeling fatigued in the mornings. I just couldn't really feel like I could do anything until the afternoon. I started like feeling like my vision wasn't normal, like kind of like flickery or like almost snowy, and then weird things like my jaw, like my muscles in the upper part of my jaw just started to feel like really tense and like I was clenching, but I wasn't, and then they were just sore all the time. And honestly, the biggest thing that annoyed me early on was I didn't have an appetite. Like I had to force myself to eat breakfast and lunch. Like I couldn't eat. It was actually like almost, I wouldn't say painful in a physical sense, but it's almost like uncomfortable to put food in my mouth. And I'm a foodie. Like naturally, I love to eat like food and I love to enjoy different kinds of foods. And so that was really troubling to me. And I started losing a lot of weight. Um, in an unhealthy way. And so that was probably the thing I was the most scared of was my weight. Um, and so I just started talking to the people I knew about like what I was going through. And I would just say things from time to time as in conversation about like, this is a weird symptom. It's not going away. Um, my insurance company, my health insurance company sent me a letter saying, hey, we're offering free consultations with a nurse on the phone. If you just want to schedule it here. I'm like, sure, I'll take them up on it. I'm going through this. So I called the nurse and I was like, these are the different symptoms I'm going through. And she's like, oh man, yeah, it seems like, this symptom, I don't think that's related to this one. It seems like you got other things going on. So I'm really concerned about your fatigue. And I was starting to have a little bit of that tingling in my hand started to turn into numbness. She's like, I'm really concerned about the numbness going on and the heart palpitations and all this stuff. So I think you have like probably a heart arrhythmia. So she wanted me to go see a cardiologist. She said, if they don't find anything, they'll probably send you to a neurologist. But don't worry about the appetite. Don't worry about all these other things. That's something different. I was like, I knew in my mind, but all of these things kind of come and go together. And I would feel this underlying sense of just physical stress. And like at sometimes it feels like it was manifesting in the heart way, and other times it was the neurological way. And other times it felt like the dizziness and the visual. It seemed like a complete package to me. And so I didn't want to go to the hospital system and just get, you know, kind of spun around all the different specialists because I knew that's what would happen. I knew my deductible was high. I was going to spend a ton of money on this, and I wasn't going to get answers, and I knew that. I was trying to figure out what next steps to even take to start exploring it. And my coworker, this is just about a month into like the really more intense symptoms. My coworker said, I had Lyme disease for 12 years and we finally got it diagnosed, and everything you're talking about is what I was going through, and you really need to get it checked out. And so that was like a godsend to me because I can't imagine where I would be without that one statement.
That's huge because a lot of people spend pretty much their entire lives wondering what's wrong with them and then being gaslit by doctors and specialists and everything else, and they still don't know what it is.
Right.
I've talked to a lot of people who are in that boat that really feel like they've spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to figure out what was wrong with them. And, they find out years later that it's Lyme and, obviously other microbes and stuff like that. I had a similar situation. For me, I was sick since 2018 for like 3 years, and I had two different people suggest it was Lyme disease. And
Hmm.
I was like, I live in Houston. I'm not really, in areas that are, kind of tick populated, but, ticks are obviously everywhere. But in terms of being prevalent, a prevalent area full of ticks or full of Lyme disease, Houston's not it. However, the band that I was a part of were based in Nashville, and I was
Mhm.
in a house that backed up some woods, and somehow one of the ticks from the backyard got in the house, I guess through maybe the dog or one of the kids in the house or something, and I ended up getting bit. And so I didn't remember until like 3 years after, I had started feeling symptoms. But, that is both of us. I mean, it's so crazy the parallels between you and I, because everything you're saying is
Yeah.
so similar to my story. And, what I'm hoping, from this too, is people hear this story and be like, man, that sounds just like what I'm experiencing and all the other things.
Hmm.
But the real question is, for me, I went and got tested with the two main tests that they do here in the States, the ELISA and the Western blot. Both of them came back negative.
Yeah.
And I went a whole nother year without finding out without getting a diagnosis.
Wow.
So my question to you is, like, how did you get an actual diagnosis that, hey, this is Lyme? How did you go from somebody
Yeah.
saying, hey, suggesting it's Lyme, to you have an actual diagnosis?
Well, again, like everything that happened is a godsend. So for me, um, I know a lot of people who've had Lyme. The area that I'm in actually is pretty prevalent with Lyme cases. And so there's a lot of people that I knew who've gone through the process. My mom, my sister both had it, but they had it treated with antibiotics successfully. But my coworker who initially recommended it, she said, I go to this place in Shipshewana, Indiana, which is it's a hotbed for um, Mennonites and Amish people. And Mennonite and Amish people love natural medicine, and so we have a lot of natural functional medicine doctors in the Shipshewana area of Indiana, which is about an hour away from where I live. She said, there's this clinic down there. They'll look at your blood under a microscope and they'll charge you $5. Just go do it. See what they come up with. It's like, okay, I can spend $5 on this, like super easy. So I went down there. They put my blood under a microscope. They said, yep, spirochete bacteria right there. Now they can't give a medical diagnosis on that, and they couldn't treat it. Well, they have like herbal remedies. They do, I think, the Cowden protocol. But I was wanting to make sure that it was Lyme and have a more of a formal diagnosis on that. So I found a functional practice locally who they do vibrant testing. I did get diagnosed with, I think it was 3 or 4 different strains of Borrelia burgdorferi. Well, no, it was the Lyme. It was Borrelia burgdorferi, but there's other variants as well, like Borrelia Vanessa. There's all these other ones. I have basically a German one and an Italian one. They're actually foreign. Sometimes those can get into the U.S. through like birds and things like that might carry it over. So that was a little interesting. She said none of my tests would have been positive through the CDC based on their parameters, but they were through Vibrant. So yeah, so that's how I got it tested and confirmed that there was Lyme. Unfortunately, no other of the common co-infections came through. So no Babesia, no Bartonella, no mono or anything like that. I did have like a strep strain. She says pretty common, but that was kind of it. Is just the Lyme itself at that time. Now later I was that we looked into a mold toxicity, and I did come back with several strains of high mold content. So that might be playing a big part in my situation as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the microscope, the live blood analysis. You know, obviously being from Houston and not having the Lyme, epidemic, in different states or like different states, we don't have like that type of specialists and people that'll do that type of stuff that I know of, at least. Especially with Lyme disease, there's only like one or two doctors here in Houston that even know about it, or LLMDs that treat it. But
Mm-hmm.
after about actually about 4 years of treating Lyme myself with herbs, I did the Nutrimetics Cowden, I did Vitoplan and a couple others, and obviously all the supplements and all that kind of stuff. But after treating for 4 years, I got really curious because I was very symptomatic still, and most of my symptoms were neurological. I got to a point to
Mm-hmm.
where I went from being kind of in bed and fatigued, and I think I had a pretty bad case because mine spread to my brain, and I started having all the stuff you were talking about, a lot of the like neuro kind of visual snow and derealization and disassociation
Mm-hmm.
and all these other like just crazy symptoms that just never, they still haven't gone away, most of them. Brain fog, all those things. But I treated for 4 years. I got a lot better in terms of like my physical, abilities, being able to go work out and run and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But after 4 years of treatment, was still symptomatic. So I like went on Amazon and bought a microscope, and I like pricked my finger and put blood on the microscope, as crazy as this sounds. And through the microscope, I could literally see these microbes in my blood.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's frustrating because your story, although unfortunate that you have Lyme, man, it sounds so like kind of things were kind of aligned because so many people go, years without knowing what's wrong, and they were able to see these microbes in your blood, and then you got obviously the vibrant tests and stuff like that. But for me
Yeah.
to be able to see these microbes in my blood was like, whoa, it almost like put a target on the enemy, if you will. Like I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, they're still there. We got to keep, treating. So what are some of the treatments that that you've tried, and what do you feel like's like kind of the best thing that's helped you? And
Yeah. Um, so as I mentioned before, I know a lot of people who've had Lyme disease, who've treated successfully. And the common theme of all of those people is long-term antibiotics. And so I found a practice that was willing to take that strategy. I understood the risks of, it could upset your sort of your gut health, and it could be hard on your body long term. But in my mind, conquering Lyme was way more important to me than gut health. And I'm like, I'll take the risk. I'll build up my gut after the fact if needed. My sister had to go through that as well, but she did it successfully. So I started with about a month of Doxy, and Doxy I think got me to a place of functional. Um, I was on the borderline of being dysfunctional before treatment. I was having trouble just getting through the day, especially at work. I did take off a little bit of work, maybe like one evening, I think, or one afternoon, and maybe I worked from home one day. But so it wasn't like I wasn't working, but it was really hard to get through every appointment, get through every day. And once I was on Doxy, that started to feel like easier. My symptoms certain symptoms started going away. The really deep fatigue and just body aches that I was experiencing, that went away. Another symptom I hadn't mentioned yet, insomnia, that mostly went away. I still had trouble. My sleep never went back to normal, but I was actually able to fall asleep at least, which there were times before treatment where I wouldn't fall asleep until like 5 in the morning. And that was really nice to be able to sleep again. So the antibiotics started to work. I got to the point. where I felt like I got to a stable spot where I could get through each day. I still had some symptoms. I was still dizzy. The visual stuff would come and go here and there. I didn't have 100% energy, but I started working out again. I started eating again. My weight went back to where it was before Lyme, so that was good. I felt like my strength was coming back online, and my practitioner wanted me to try going off of the antibiotics. It was about February, so I was at this point I was on antibiotics for maybe 4 or 5 months. So we switched to an herbal protocol. I wanted more than just herbs. I had tried a few herbs before I was officially diagnosed, and a ton of supplements, and I just wasn't getting anywhere on that. So um, I decided to do more than just the herbs. I did something called exercise with oxygen therapy in place of hyperbaric oxygen. It's not as powerful, but you can do it at home and you can do it pretty consistently. So I was doing that almost every other day, and and then a month to the day that I stopped antibiotics, I had a really bad recurrence and just felt like I was in that deep fatigue again. Felt like my anxiety like came back really strong. My appetite went away again. And so I immediately jumped back on my antibiotics, called my doctor, said we need a follow up. That's when we did the mold testing. That's when I found out I had some underlying mold issues. And she basically prescribed me some extra supplements for the mold. And I'm like, I don't know if this is enough. I got my blood looked at a second time and they could still see the bacteria. He said he was seeing some sort of fungus in my blood as well, so probably mold. Um, and I didn't really know kind of what to do next. The practitioner I was with was really pushing ozone therapy in a very expensive kind called EBOO. And I was warming up to it, but I got really suspicious when she threatened to terminate treating me if I didn't go that direction, and it was expensive. So I decided to find a different practitioner who I felt would be more willing to work with me within my budget and within my concerns. And I found a really nice practice, and she was willing to kind of hear me out and listen to what I was comfortable with and work with me with my budget. So we switched up the antibiotics to something that I did a lot of my own research and realized, oh, there's more than just like 2 different antibiotics for Lyme. There's like a ton of antibiotics. For anyone listening, look up if you're wanting to go the antibiotic route, look up Marty Ross. He has an antibiotic guide online, and he goes through the different antibiotics, like which stage of the Lyme disease that they work best in and where in the body they work best in. So Lyme can be in different stages. They can be in defensive mode. They can be in growth mode. And the bacteria can also be in different locations in the body. They can be in the blood. They can go and drive into tissue. And so there's different classes of antibiotics that work well depending on what's going on. So I used that and kind of built out my own protocol and sent it to my doctor. And she said, okay, let's prescribe all this. And I really started to see a lot more improvement through that. But that's when I started getting a lot of the GI issues. And I got to the spot where I just couldn't continue with the antibiotics because the GI distress was becoming too unbearable. So it was about July of last year where I completely went off antibiotics. I jumped on more natural approach. I was looking at a mineral treatment called Minerals RX. I heard a lot of people do well on that. And I think it probably kept the Lyme at bay. But this is where now I have a complex issue of potential bacterial overgrowth in my gut. So SIBO, probably have mold and Lyme. And I just felt stuck for like 4 months of just not really getting anywhere. Symptoms would come and go. My GI symptoms just kind of stayed the way they were. And so that's when I decided to start going towards the ozone treatment again. And so that's where I'm at. I started going to low dose ozone, and I've graduated into the higher end, the EBOO. We call it EBOO. I've done 3 treatments of that. There's been a lot of improvement that I've noticed on that. Probably my GI issues went away completely after my first session on the EBU. And that was one of my biggest issues at that point. I'm still dealing with a lot of other symptoms. The Lyme symptoms themselves are like the visual issues, the dizziness issues. I'm starting to think that may not be quite the Lyme itself, but may be more related to detoxing issues. When you kill off the Lyme bacteria, the dead bacteria can cause all sorts of inflammation in your body. And so those actually get heightened sometimes after my ozone treatments. And then I've been experiencing some moments of calm after that as well. Another treatment that I want to shout out to that I did a little bit is something called Firefly phototherapy. It's a light therapy. And I've actually had a lot of success with light therapy. It's I was not a believer going into it, but I'm like, it's $70 a session, I'll try it, and that one actually, I think, does a really good job of regulating the nervous system. And I've done a lot of research into light therapy. There's a lot of evidence out there that light can really impact the way your cells function. It can really generate healing. And so I'm a spreadsheet nerd, so I think financial planning suits me well. And since I began, I rated every day I've put in a spreadsheet how I've been feeling in different areas. I have like 5 or 6 different symptom clusters I track, and I track it every day, whether it was, out of 1 to 5, how bad it was. And just my overall score. I give myself an overall score every day. So I'm able to track just generally how I'm feeling throughout my whole journey here. And the other thing I track is which treatments I'm taking, which days. And I gave my spreadsheet and I uploaded it to Grok, to AI, and I asked it to analyze, different treatments and how they're affecting my overall symptoms. And it said that the Firefly therapy actually 8 days after I take it is when I have my clearest days. And 19 days after I did it, I would have my worst days, which tells me I had a period of clarity, and then I went back down afterwards after that wears off. So I was only doing it once a month. So that being said, I'm suspicious that that's doing really good. And I just try to figure out right now where I'm at is I'm trying to figure out a way to calm my nervous system, because I think that's going to be a big component of my healing. I have done research on CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and that's usually used in the context of mold. But what's fascinating is I've been listening to some researchers who are saying that the people who have CIRS have a genetic makeup that also make them susceptible to chronic Lyme. So there's a theory out there that chronic Lyme is CIRS. It's your body's stuck in a fight or flight mode against the Lyme bacteria, and it can't turn that off. So that's what I've been trying to figure out a way to better regulate my nervous system. That's my current focus right now.
All of this, all the treatments you mentioned, it gets so exhausting, just hearing all the different options, and this doctor and this thing helped me and that thing helped me. And I took a photo. I was in a bad place, and I had boxes and boxes and bags of bottles and all the stuff that I had treated with, and I put it in my jacuzzi tub bathtub, and it was like almost halfway full. It was just insane how many different things I had tried. And so, it can be pretty taxing. As you're talking, I'm trying to think of something I took or something that I did that really helped. You mentioned insomnia, and I didn't sleep for like 7 years almost. I mean, I was just, it took such a long time for me to have, I guess, my nervous system to calm down enough, maybe from the viral load or from all the panic and chaos of the heart palpitations and all the other symptoms, because I became very, very hyper focused on my health, my blood pressure, my heartbeat, all the sensations in my body. And I took Vital Plan, which is kind of an all-in-one. I think it's Bill Rawls. And I took that for about a year or so, and then I started having the ability to sleep again, where I could get through the night almost. I would still have nocturnal panic attacks, but
Hmm.
I found that taking Vital Plan really, really helped me a lot. And it's kind of like an all-in-one. There's like 4 different bottles. They do, each one does a specific thing. But you
Yeah.
mentioned nervous system. For me, I had to like go on long walks. I had to do, some people are super against yoga, but I did like, you know, 10, 15 minutes of just literally laying on the ground in my room and just stretching, yoga type
Hmm.
stretches. I had to do so many different things. EFT tapping. I did, I even tried the essential oil thing, and another friend of mine had me try CBD oil, all these different things. What do you feel like helped you calm your nervous system down the most?
So vagus nerve breathing is probably at least on an acute level, was the best for me. I remember even before I started treatment, when I was in the worst of it, I would come home from work and I would lay on the couch and I would do a 20-minute breathing exercise. The thought of food sickened me. I started doing the breathing, and pretty much every time, 20 minutes to the dot, all of a sudden I had enough of an appetite where I could at least choke down a meal. So I felt like that's what was getting me to the place of calm where I could even, my body was ready to even start resting. Because, it's the sympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest. And when you're constantly in the parasympathetic nervous system of fight or flight, your body, it's designed to run away from danger. So imagine a bear is attacking you and you got to run away. Body's designed to put all of its energy into fleeing. It's going to divert all of its energy away from resting. It's going to divert all of its energy away from digesting. So when Lyme is attacking you, your body gets stuck in that mode and you have to figure out a way to calm it down. And so for me, vagus nerve breathing was a big one. More recently, I've been doing Epsom salt baths, which have been, I think, helpful. I did do a few other things I didn't mention. I did a lot of infrared saunas. Dry saunas, I didn't get anything from, but infrared saunas were good until I started having GI issues. And then I felt like it would stir up my stomach pain. A lot of what can happen with saunas is the heat can cause your body to start dumping toxins into your gut. And then if you're having trouble getting rid of the toxins, it can kind of just recirculate things and make you feel worse. So I definitely experienced that when I started having more GI issues. And I think a lot of that was caused by some detox pathways being kind of gunked up. So all that to say is the infrared sauna was helping, I think, too until then.
Not to backtrack, but how long have you
Sure.
been dealing with these symptoms, and how long have you been treating?
Yeah. So it was June of 2024 where things started to feel intense and kind of interrupting my life and my health in a significant way. So I got diagnosed at the end of August of that year. So I started treatment September. So it's been about a year and a half now of actually treating.
What's been the hardest part about, not just the treatment, but what's been the hardest part about finding out you had Lyme, and in what ways of your life has it impacted you? Maybe has it impacted your relationship with your wife? Is it, your work? I mean, what's been like some of the hardest parts about this whole journey?
Yeah. So finding out I had Lyme was a relief. I was having so many symptoms that I thought maybe I had cancer. Maybe I had, some major issue going on with my nervous system or something. And it's like all the big scary questions about what is happening to me. Once I had an answer to that, I knew a lot of people who had Lyme, and who had cured it in their mind. And so I was relieved. I said, okay, we have an answer, we have a treatment, we can get through this. And it just became a little bit more, in my case, a lot more difficult to see that progress. And so through that, it's really becomes a mental game. It's like, okay, I did that treatment. It worked a little bit, but not, I'm still struggling. I did this treatment. It may not have worked at all. I did that treatment, and where is this ending up? So at first I was confident I was going to come out the other side just 100%, healthy. And now the question, which is a very difficult question to process, is what does life look like if I don't get better? Or what if life looks like if there's a limit to how well I get? And it's definitely deep personal questions that I had to wrestle through. A lot of it for me was in regards to my faith. What is God doing? I'm a Christian, so I believe God's sovereign over all of these things, and I had to ask some pretty hard questions about my own faith. Do I need an answer from God, or am I okay trusting in Him, even though this doesn't feel nice? What is my purpose in life in regards to my faith and to my responsibility to my family when I'm not at my full capacity? Just a lot of questions like that I'm been working through. I've always been proud of my capabilities, and there's been a lot of times when I've had to say I can't do that. I'm just not feeling good. I've had to take a step out of playing piano at my church. The hardest is when my 5-year-old comes over and says, "Can you play with me?" And I'm just wrecked on the couch. I can't. That just really hits me to my core. Having to say no to that. So it's hard, knowing that I have limits now on how much I can push and how much I can take on. Relationally, my wife has been incredibly supportive. I think at first she wasn't sure what was going on and maybe thought, maybe I'm just going to get through this, before we had a diagnosis. She, I think she was getting a little tired of me constantly talking about how I felt every day. I think in her mind it was like, you probably just are sick. You'll get over it probably, in a week or two. But I felt this was something different from the very beginning. But once she realized that this is something bigger than just a sickness, I think she just really has been patient, and she's taken on a lot more work around the house, which has been huge, and just never complained once. And this is just an incredible blessing, because I know for a lot of people, their spouse isn't on board, and they don't understand, and there's a lot of issues that can come up within a marriage because of a chronic illness. And but that's been the biggest blessing in my life, is her support. So
I think it's hard looking at you across the screen and seeing you get emotional about your children and the lack of ability to kind of be there for them in this season of your life. I try to stay off the Lyme groups as much as I can, because it's heavy, and as you said, a lot of people don't have the support that they need in these moments. And because we look fine, so many people, especially the people closest to us, don't really understand.
yeah,
I look fine. Oh, he looks fine. He's fine, because I'm able to put some clothes on and go wherever. But it's rough. And this thing, it doesn't just affect your health. It starts affecting your time, your money, your job, your career.
Mhm.
And, it's a blessing for you that you have a wife that is supportive and is there to kind of help you manage things as you walk through this. And what I want to tell you, man, the whole goal of doing this, doing these episodes and this new journey for me is to raise awareness, but also to give a voice to individuals like you who you're not saying woe is me, but you're saying, man, like this is real. Like I'm really
Mhm.
struggling, even though you can't see it on an internal level, I am struggling just to maintain. I'm
Mhm.
struggling just to be a father. I'm struggling just to be a mother. I'm struggling just to be a human being in this world because my vehicle, my body is it's broken. There's something going on inside of me that
Right.
people can't see. And so, you mentioned God, you mentioned your faith. What do you feel like has gotten you through this journey, especially like, when you do think about your kids or you do think about your future, what do you think has gotten you through so far through all of this, all this stuff you're talking about?
I think a big part of my faith, and just dealing with this disease and the big life questions boils down to the difference between purpose and happiness. Um, I think we can have joy and purpose in our suffering without feeling happy. I was thinking about this the other day. Is Jesus was called a man of sorrows, not a man of happiness. He knew what it was like to suffer, and that was his purpose in life, was to come and suffer in our place. So suffering for a Christian is not, it's not defeat. And so it's something that I believe God uses for a good purpose. And I don't always have to see what that purpose is. Um, but I believe we're called to trust in the goodness of God while we're suffering. And that's our call. So I feel like I keep bringing myself back to that is, in First Peter, it says that for those of us who suffer according to God's will, we should entrust our souls to our faithful Creator while doing good. And that's the call, not to be happy, not to live the life we dreamed of living, but to simply trust and continue to live the way God called us to, even in the midst of all the suffering. And so that's been probably the hardest thing to wrap my mind around, because it's not like, oh, I believe that. And so that means that it's always true in my life, that that's the attitude I have. It's a constant attitude I have to bring myself back into, is recognizing that this is in God's hands, that no matter how hard I strive to get better, my healing is not going to come from a treatment or from a doctor, but it's also ultimately in God's hands when I get better and through which treatment I get better, and if I get better at all. And so when I do come to the place of acceptance of those truths, I think my mental um, state becomes a lot better and more stable. But again, it's hard. It's easier said than done. So it's not like, oh, I'm always in that state. I have to work at it.
Yeah, I get that. I've had to transition from being the artist, the singer guy that traveled the world doing music, to you're at home. You've had to sell your home. You've had to move in with family. You've had to sell your cars. You've spent tens of thousands of dollars in treatment and you're still not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when people lose everything, especially when their entire identity is wrapped in their career, you're like a soldier with no war. You're
Yeah.
like a I use this thing about Mike Tyson. I watched this documentary of him years ago now, and I remember right when I was going to quit music before I had a really interesting opportunity, and I went on to put a record out and do some cool stuff. But I remember watching this documentary about Mike Tyson, and he was talking after this fight with Lennox Lewis, where he got in the fight. He's in the fight. He gets beat, and this is like the first time I think that he had ever gotten knocked out or lost a fight. And the commentator came up to him and said, "Mike, you're Mike Tyson. How did you lose?" And he said, "I just don't have the fight in me anymore." And that spoke to me so much back, then, because at the time I had worked so hard in my career to become this successful artist. I could relate so much to him in that moment. And I literally just said, "I'm done." And then I had this I don't know, it was weird. It was like a month later or something. I got a call from a record label and went on to, like I said, be this singer in this group. And then out of nowhere, at the peak of my career, the peak of my success as an artist, it all just went away because I got sick by this mysterious illness. Mm-hmm. And so that's, it's really hard when you lose everything, especially when your identity is wrapped up in that thing as it relates to purpose, and it all goes away, right? And mm-hmm. So I've been kind of picking up the pieces of that, that career or that purpose. And I've repurposed my voice from singing into this right here. I feel mm-hmm. like this is kind of the next thing on my path. And I feel like, for me at least, I really hope these messages, these episodes, these interviews with individuals like you bring hope to those that are really struggling. I don't offer, medical advice. I'm not saying, you're going to get healed or, anything like that. And, but I do want to bring hope, and I do want to inspire. And, what do you feel, or what do you hope people get from your story and your message, right now?
Yeah, well, just awareness that there are these complex diseases out there. And if you're experiencing just this unknown feeling of unhealth and the doctors aren't able to explain it, there are answers out there. And there's ways that you can pursue those answers. I would always recommend people, if there's a place nearby that will look at your blood, go do it. At least the place I went to is $5. So I don't know what other places charge, but that's a very nominal charge for just to get a little bit of answers or direction. I would hope that people would realize that suffering is not defeat. That we can still have victory in our life and purpose in our life through Christ. It doesn't mean that we always feel happy or we're always feeling healthy. Those are blessings when we have that. But there's also a blessing in our faith when we're going through these trials and these periods of suffering. So that's what I would hope, is that what I said here today encourages people in their faith, because I think that's the most important thing, if they have it, and also encourages them in their own health. If they're suffering, that they're not alone, and that there are answers, and for them to just keep pushing and keep trying to learn more and learn what's out there.
That's great. Grant, thank you so much, man, for man, not only sharing your story, but trusting me with your story. And I really do believe this is going to echo, and it's going to ripple, man. A lot of people are going to hear this, and like people have heard my story, and it's going to make an impact, and hopefully, jumpstart somebody's journey in terms of figuring out what's wrong with them, and hopefully getting them some answers. So thank you so much, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Take care.
If you'd like to be featured on the Lyme&Co podcast, email us at lymeandcopodcast@gmail.com.